Father throws his baby on the deserted road, but what the dog did next will change everything. Subscribe to the channel to receive all our thrilling stories. The dense Colorado forest stood silent in the cool night air, its ancient trees bearing witness to a scene both heartbreaking and miraculous. Michael Thompson, his face etched with lines of worry and regret, cradled a tiny bundle in his arms. His newborn son, Luke, slept peacefully, unaware of the turmoil in his father's heart. Michael's eyes darted nervously, scanning the shadows between the trees. He knew they were coming, the relentless agents of new dawn. His decision weighed heavily upon him, but he saw no other choice. With trembling hands, he gently placed Luke on a bed of soft moss beneath a towering oak. "I'm sorry, my son," Michael whispered, his voice breaking. "This is the only way to keep you safe. May the forest protect you until we meet again." As if in response to his plea, a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, and from the undergrowth emerged a sight that made Michael gasp. A dog with fur as silver as moonlight and eyes that shimmered like molten gold padded silently towards the infant. The creature, Misty, regarded Michael with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Michael stood transfixed as Misty approached Luke, gently nuzzling the sleeping child. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of relief wash over him. Somehow he knew his son would be safe. With one last longing look at his child, Michael disappeared into the night, leaving behind the most precious part of himself in the care of the mysterious forest guardian. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, a couple's laughter echoed through the trees. Mary and John, whose cabin nestled in a nearby clearing, were taking their morning walk. For years they had dreamed of having a child, but fate had other plans. Little did they know that this ordinary morning would change their lives forever. Mary's keen ears caught an unusual sound, a baby's cry. "John, do you hear that?" she asked, her heart racing. They followed the sound, with Misty appearing seemingly out of nowhere to guide them. The silver dog led them straight to the oak where Luke lay, still wrapped in his blanket. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she lifted the infant. "Oh, John," she breathed, "it's a miracle." John, usually a man of few words, found himself speechless. He simply nodded, a lump forming in his throat as he watched his wife cradle the child they had longed for. As they debated what to do, Misty sat patiently, her golden eyes never leaving Luke. When Mary and John decided to take the baby home, the dog rose and followed, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. In the days that followed, Mary and John fell deeply in love with Luke. They marveled at his bright eyes and the way he seemed to radiate joy. The authorities were notified, but no one came forward to claim the child. As the weeks turned into months, Mary and John's dream of parenthood became a reality through adoption. Misty became a constant presence in their lives, a loyal guardian to Luke. The silver dog seemed to possess an uncanny ability to anticipate the baby's needs, often alerting Mary or John before Luke even began to cry. As Luke grew from a baby to a toddler, his connection to nature became apparent. The plants in Mary's garden seemed to flourish under his touch, growing larger and more vibrant than ever before. Animals in the forest showed no fear of the young boy, often approaching him with curiosity rather than caution. One summer day when Luke was 5, Mary watched in amazement as her son conversed with a robin perched on his outstretched hand. The bird chirped merrily, and Luke giggled as if understanding every word. "Luke, sweetheart," Mary called, "what are you and your little friend talking about?" Luke turned to her, his eyes sparkling with innocence and wonder. "She's telling me about her babies, Mama. They just learned to fly." Mary shared a look with John, who had joined her on the porch. They had long since accepted that their son was special, but moments like these still took their breath away. As Luke grew, so did his circle of friends, both human and animal. His best human friend was Emma, the granddaughter of Mrs. Martha, a respected elder in their small community. Mrs. Martha was known for her deep understanding of the forest and its ancient traditions. Emma and Luke were inseparable, spending countless hours exploring the woods under the watchful eyes of Misty and Mrs. Martha. The old woman observed Luke with keen interest, noting how the forest seemed to come alive around him. One crisp autumn afternoon when Luke was 10, Mrs. Martha pulled Mary aside. "Your boy," she said, her voice low and serious. "He's more than just special. He has a gift, a connection to this land that I've never seen before." Mary nodded, a mixture of pride and concern in her eyes. "We've noticed, but what does it mean, Martha?" The old woman smiled mysteriously. "It means, my dear, that Luke has a grand destiny ahead of him. This forest has chosen him for something important." As the years passed, Luke's bond with nature continued to strengthen. He could sense the moods of the forest, feeling its joy in the spring and its quiet contemplation in the winter. Plants flourished under his care, and he developed an uncanny ability to heal sick animals. On his 15th birthday, Luke ventured deep into the forest, guided by an inexplicable urge and faithfully followed by Misty. The silver dog led him to an ancient oak tree, its massive trunk twisted with age. As Luke approached, he felt a tingling sensation in his fingertips. Placing his hand on the rough bark, he gasped as a vision flashed before his eyes. A man who looked remarkably like him, burying something at the tree's roots. Without hesitation, Luke began to dig. His fingers soon struck something solid, a metal box, its surface corroded by time. With trembling hands, he opened it to find a letter inside, the paper yellowed but still intact. As he unfolded the letter, Luke's heart pounded. The first words made him catch his breath. "To my son, Luke." The letter was from his biological father, Michael Thompson. As Luke read, his world tilted on its axis. He learned of his true heritage, that he was the heir to an ancient clan of guardians, people tasked with maintaining the delicate balance between the natural and human worlds. Michael's words painted a picture of a secret organization called New Dawn, a group that sought to exploit the powers of nature for control and profit. It was to protect Luke from them that Michael had made the heartbreaking decision to leave him in the forest years ago. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Luke sat with his back against the old oak, Misty's head resting on his lap. His mind whirled with questions and possibilities. He thought of Mary and John, the loving parents who had raised him, and of Emma and Mrs. Martha, who had always seemed to understand his connection to the forest. He thought of the animals and plants that had been his friends and confidants throughout his life. Looking down at Misty, whose golden eyes regarded him with what seemed like understanding, Luke made a decision. He would embrace his heritage and learn to use his gifts. But first he needed guidance. As if reading his thoughts, Misty stood and gently tugged at his sleeve. Luke rose, tucking the letter safely in his pocket. Together, boy and dog made their way through the deepening twilight, heading towards Mrs. Martha's cabin. Luke knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change not only his life, but the fate of the forest he called home. With Misty by his side and the strength of the ancient guardians flowing through his veins, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they approached Mrs. Martha's warmly lit cabin, Luke took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation to come. He knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The soft glow of candlelight flickered through the windows of Mrs. Martha's cabin as Luke approached, Misty padding silently beside him. His heart raced, the weight of the letter in his pocket, a constant reminder of the revelations that had turned his world upside down. As he raised his hand to knock, the door swung open, revealing Mrs. Martha's wizened face, her eyes twinkling with a knowing light. "I've been expecting you, Luke," she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. "The forest whispers of great changes." Luke entered, the familiar scent of herbs and wood smoke washing over him. Emma sat by the fireplace, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Luke, what's going on?" He took a deep breath, his gaze moving from Emma to Mrs. Martha. I found something in the forest. A letter from my biological father." Mrs. Martha nodded sagely, settling into her favorite rocking chair. "Tell us, child. The time for secrets has passed." And so, Luke shared the contents of the letter, his voice growing stronger with each word. He spoke of the guardians of New Dawn and of the responsibility that now rested on his young shoulders. As he finished, a heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Emma was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, all those times we thought you were just different. It was this. You're some kind of forest guardian." Luke nodded, relief flooding through him at the lack of disbelief or rejection in her voice. "I guess so." but I don't know what it really means or how to be a guardian." Mrs. Martha leaned forward, her eyes intense. "That, my dear boy, is where I come in. I've been waiting for this day since you first set foot in my cabin as a toddler. The signs were always there for those who knew how to look." She stood, moving to an old trunk in the corner of the room. From it, she withdrew a leather-bound book, its cover adorned with intricate designs of leaves and vines. "This has been passed down through generations of forest keepers. It contains the knowledge you'll need to understand and develop your gifts." Luke accepted the book with trembling hands, feeling a surge of energy as his fingers touched the worn leather. "But why you? How do you know about all this?" A sad smile played on Mrs. Martha's lips. "Because, Luke, I too am descended from the Guardians. My powers have waned with age, but I've always known it would be my duty to guide the next true Guardian when the time came." Emma's eyes widened. "Grandma, you never told me." "There are many secrets in this forest, child," Mrs. Martha replied gently. "Some must remain hidden until the right moment." Over the next few weeks, Luke split his time between his normal life with Mary and John and secret lessons with Mrs. Martha. He learned of the intricate balance between the natural world and the human realm, of the energy that flowed through all living things, and of his ability to tap into and direct that energy. Under Mrs. Martha's guidance, Luke's powers grew exponentially. He learned to communicate more clearly with animals, to accelerate the growth of plants, and even to sense disturbances in the forest's energy from miles away. Emma, ever loyal, threw herself into helping Luke however she could. She pored over the ancient texts with him, helped him practice his skills, and provided a steady source of support and encouragement. As Luke's 15th year drew to a close, Mrs. Martha decided it was time for a crucial step in his development as a guardian, the awakening ritual. "This ritual," she explained one evening as they sat around her cabin, "will fully activate your powers and connect you deeply to the heart of the forest. It's not without risk, Luke. The experience can be overwhelming, and you'll be more vulnerable to those who might wish to exploit your gifts." Luke squared his shoulders, his voice firm. "I'm ready. I have to do this. For the forest, for my father, for all of us." The night of the ritual arrived, coinciding with the summer solstice. Luke, Emma, and Mrs. Martha made their way to a hidden clearing deep in the forest, Misty leading the way. In the center stood an ancient oak, its massive trunk glowing faintly in the moonlight. Mrs. Martha instructed Luke to sit at the base of the tree, his back against its rough bark. "Close your eyes," she said softly. "Breathe deeply and let your mind empty. Feel the energy of the forest around you." As Luke complied, Mrs. Martha began to chant in a language he didn't recognize. The air grew thick with energy, and Luke felt a tingling sensation spread from his fingertips throughout his body. Suddenly, the world around him fell away. He found himself in a vast, misty realm, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to touch the stars. And there, bathed in soft light, stood a woman with eyes as green as summer leaves and hair the color of chestnuts. "Mom?" Luke whispered, somehow knowing who she was. Helen smiled, her form shimmering like sunlight through leaves. "My beautiful boy, how you've grown." Tears welled in Luke's eyes. I have so many questions." "I know, my love," Helen said gently. "But our time is short. You must listen carefully. You are the heir to a powerful legacy, Luke. The guardian of two worlds that must remain in balance." She went on to explain the depth of his powers, the responsibility he now carried, and the dangers he would face. New Dawn seeks to upset the balance for their own greed. They believe they can control nature, bend it to their will. But nature is not a force to be controlled. It's a partner to be respected and protected. Luke absorbed her words, feeling both the weight of his duty and the strength of his heritage. "How do I stop them?" Helen's smile was tinged with sadness. "With love, Luke. Always act with love. Protect the balance, nurture the connection between humanity and nature. Your powers come from that connection. Never forget that." As her form began to fade, Luke reached out desperately. "Mom, wait! Don't go!" "I'm always with you, my son," her voice echoed as the misty realm dissolved around him. "In the rustle of leaves, in the song of the river, I love you." Luke's eyes flew open, tears streaming down his face. He found himself back in the clearing, Emma and Mrs. Martha watching him with concern. Misty whined softly, nuzzling his hand. "Luke," Emma asked hesitantly, "are you okay? You were glowing." He nodded, still processing the intense experience. "I saw her, Emma. I saw my mum." As Luke recounted his vision, Mrs. Martha listened intently, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "The awakening was successful," she said finally. "You've been given a great gift, Luke, but also a great responsibility." In the days that followed, Luke found his connection to the forest had deepened beyond anything he'd experienced before. He could sense the ebb and flow of life all around him, could hear the whispers of the trees and the songs of the earth itself. But with this heightened awareness came a growing sense of urgency. He could feel disturbances at the edges of the forest. New dawn was on the move, their activities sending ripples through the natural world. As summer faded into autumn, Luke knew the time had come to take action. With Emma, Mrs. Martha, and Misty by his side, he began to prepare for the challenges ahead. He would need all his newfound skills, all his courage, and all the support of his friends and family to face the threats to his forest home. The first leaves were turning gold when Luke sensed a major disturbance to the south. That night, gathered around Mrs. Martha's fireplace, he shared his plan. "We need to investigate," he said, his voice filled with determination. "If New Dawn is setting up operations near the forest, we have to know what we're up against." Emma nodded, her face set with resolve. "I'm with you, Luke, whatever it takes." Mrs. Martha regarded them both with a mixture of pride and concern. "Be careful, both of you. New Dawn is not to be underestimated. But remember, Luke, your greatest strength lies not in your power over nature, but in your connection to it. Trust in that bond and in each other." As they prepared for their first real confrontation with New Dawn, Luke felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but he also knew he wasn't facing it alone. With the spirit of his mother watching over him, the wisdom of Mrs. Martha guiding him, the loyalty of Emma and Misty beside him, and the strength of the forest flowing through him, Luke was ready to embrace his destiny as a guardian. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of an adventure that would test his powers, his courage, and his heart in ways he could never have imagined. The crisp autumn air nipped at Luke's cheeks as he, Emma, and Misty made their way through the forest. The usually vibrant colors of fall seemed muted today, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of what was to come. Luke's senses were on high alert, his newfound connection to the forest allowing him to feel every disturbance in the natural balance. As they approached the southern border of their woodland home, a sense of wrongness grew stronger, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Do you feel that?" he whispered to Emma, who walked beside him, her own face etched with concern. She shook her head. "I can't feel it like you can, Luke, but I can see it. Look at the trees. Their leaves are wilting much faster than they should be." Luke nodded grimly. Whatever New Dawn was up to, it was already having a detrimental effect on the forest. They needed to find out more and put a stop to it. As they crested a small hill, Luke suddenly held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. In the valley below, partially hidden by the trees, stood a series of sleek metallic structures. Strange machines hummed and pulsed with an eerie blue light, and men in dark uniforms patrolled the perimeter. "That must be one of New Dawn's outposts," Luke murmured, his heart racing. "But what are those machines doing?" Emma pulled out a pair of binoculars from her backpack and peered through them. "It looks like they're extracting something from the ground. See those tubes? They're glowing with the same blue light." Luke closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses. What he felt made him gasp. "They're not just taking from the ground, Emma. They're draining the life force from the forest itself." A low growl from Misty alerted them to movement below. A group of New Dawn operatives was heading into the forest, carrying what looked like surveying equipment. "They're expanding their operation," Luke realized with a sinking feeling. "We have to do something." Emma grabbed his arm. "Luke, wait. We can't just charge in there. We need a plan." He nodded, forcing himself to think rationally despite the urgency he felt. "You're right, let's follow them, see what they're up to. Maybe we can sabotage their equipment without being seen." Moving silently through the underbrush, with Misty scouting ahead, they tracked the New Dawn team deeper into the forest. Luke could feel the trees around them crying out in distress, and it took all his willpower not to lash out at the intruders. Finally, the team stopped in a small clearing. As they began to set up their equipment, Luke and Emma exchanged a determined look. It was time to act. Luke closed his eyes, focusing on the energy of the forest around him. He visualized roots and vines, asking them to grow, to tangle, to protect their home. To his amazement and relief, the plants responded eagerly, surging up from the ground to ensnare the New Dawn equipment. The operatives shouted in confusion and alarm, as their machines were quickly engulfed in a mass of vegetation. In the chaos, no one noticed the silent figure of Misty, darting in to snatch a datapad that had been dropped in the commotion. As the New Dawn team scrambled to free their equipment, Luke, Emma, and Misty made their escape, hearts pounding with exhilaration and nerves. Once they were a safe distance away, they paused to catch their breath and examine their prize. The datapad was locked, but Emma, always quick with technology, managed to bypass the security. "Luke, look at this," she said, her voice hushed with awe and horror. "They're not just draining the forest's energy, they're trying to find a way to control it, to weaponize nature itself." Luke's mind raced as he absorbed this information. The threat was even greater than they had imagined. "We need to show this to Mrs. Martha," he decided. "She'll know what to do next." As they made their way back home, Luke felt a mix of emotions. Pride at their successful first strike against New Dawn, fear at the scope of the organization's plans, and a deep, burning determination to protect the forest and all who called it home. That evening, gathered once again in Mrs. Martha's cozy cabin, they shared their discoveries. The old woman's face grew grave as she examined the information on the datapad. "This is worse than I feared," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "New Dawn isn't just after power or money. They want to fundamentally alter the balance of nature. If they succeed, the consequences would be catastrophic." Luke leaned forward, his eyes blazing with determination. "Then we have to stop them. But how? There's so few of us, and they have all this technology and manpower." Mrs. Martha smiled, a glint of mischief in her eyes. But we have something they don't, Luke. We have the forest on our side. And you, my dear boy, are learning to be its voice and its hands." Over the next few weeks, Luke threw himself into his training with renewed vigor. Under Mrs. Martha's guidance, he learned to extend his influence over larger areas of the forest, to communicate with a wider variety of plants and animals, and even to manipulate the weather on a small scale. Emma, too, was hard at work. She pored over the data they had stolen, learning New Dawn systems and protocols. Her technical skills would be crucial in their fight against the organization's advanced technology. As autumn deepened into winter, Luke and his allies launched a series of guerrilla attacks on New Dawn's operations. They sabotaged equipment, disrupted experiments, and gathered more intelligence. Each small victory boosted their confidence and weakened New Dawn's hold on the forest. But their actions didn't go unnoticed. New Dawn increased their security, making each subsequent operation more dangerous. Luke knew they were walking a razor's edge. One mistake could expose them all. One frosty morning, as Luke was meditating in a snowy clearing, he felt a disturbance in the forest's energy that made his blood run cold. Opening his eyes, he found himself face to face with a man he had never met, but instantly recognized. "Hello, Luke," said Michael Thompson, his eyes, so similar to Luke's own, filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "It's time we talked." Luke's heart pounded as he stared at his biological father, the man who had left him in the forest all those years ago. 1,000 questions raced through his mind, but what came out was a single, choked word. "Dad." Michael nodded, a sad smile playing on his lips. "You've grown into quite the guardian, son. I've been watching your progress. Your mother would be so proud." "Why?" Luke managed to ask, emotions warring within him. "Why did you leave me? Why are you here now?" Michael sighed heavily, his breath misting in the cold air. "I left to protect you, Luke. New Dawn. They were after our family, after the power we carry in our blood. I thought if I disappeared, if I let them think they had won, you would be safe." He paused, his eyes scanning the winter landscape. "But I was wrong. They never stopped looking, never stopped trying to harness the power of nature, and now they're closer than ever to succeeding." Luke's mind reeled with this new information. So you've been fighting them all this time? Alone? Michael nodded. Not alone. There are others scattered around the world trying to maintain the balance. But we're losing ground, Luke. That's why I'm here. We need your help. As Luke processed this, a new thought struck him. Wait. If you're not with New Dawn, then who's leading them? A shadow passed over Michael's face. My brother, your uncle. He believes he can control nature, bend it to his will. He doesn't understand that true harmony comes from partnership, not domination. Luke felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. An uncle he never knew existed, a global network of guardians, a threat larger than he had imagined. It was almost too much to take in. But as he looked into his father's eyes, seeing the same determination he felt reflected there, Luke knew what he had to do. This was bigger than him, bigger than their forest. The entire balance of nature was at stake. What do you need me to do? He asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. Michael's face broke into a proud smile. First, we need to gather our allies. Your friends, the animals of the forest and the other guardians. Then we prepare for the biggest fight of our lives. As they walked back towards Mrs. Martha's cabin, Luke felt a mix of fear and excitement. He knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but for the first time he felt truly ready to embrace his destiny as a guardian. With his father by his side, his friends at his back, and the power of nature flowing through him, Luke was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The real battle for the balance of nature was about to begin, and he was determined to see it through to the end. The crackling fire in Mrs. Martha's cabin seemed to mirror the intensity of the conversations taking place around it. Luke sat between his adoptive parents, Mary and John, and his biological father, Michael. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mixture of relief, confusion, and apprehension. Mary's voice trembled slightly as she spoke, her hand tightly gripping John's. All these years, we thought you had abandoned Luke, but you were protecting him. Michael nodded solemnly. I know it doesn't excuse my actions, but yes, leaving Luke was the hardest decision I've ever made. I'm grateful beyond words for the love and care you've given him. John, usually stoic, had tears in his eyes. He's our son too, you know, guardian or not. I know, Michael said softly, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Luke needs all of us now more than ever. Luke, who had been quietly absorbing the exchange, finally spoke up. So what's our next move? How do we stop New Dawn? Mrs. Martha, who had been silently observing from her rocking chair, leaned forward. We need to gather our forces just as your father said. But it's not just about numbers. It's about connecting with the true power of nature in all its forms. Over the next few days, Luke's world expanded in ways he never imagined. Michael introduced him to other guardians who had been in hiding, each with their own unique connection to nature. There was Arya, who could communicate with the winds, Riven, whose power lay in the waters, and Terra, with her deep bond to the earth itself. As they shared their knowledge and experiences, Luke's understanding of his role as a guardian deepened. He wasn't just protecting one forest, he was part of an ancient tradition of maintaining the balance of the entire natural world. Emma, ever practical, focused on gathering intelligence. Her technical skills proved invaluable as she hacked into New Dawn systems, uncovering more of their plans. They're not just focused on our forest, she reported one evening. They have operations all over the world, each targeting a different aspect of nature. Luke felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Then we need to think bigger. It's not enough to just defend our home. We need to take the fight to them. Michael nodded approvingly. That's the spirit, son. But remember, our strength lies in our connection to nature. We don't fight like they do. Under the combined guidance of Michael, Mrs. Martha, and the other guardians, Luke's training intensified. He learned to extend his senses far beyond the forest, to feel the pulse of nature across vast distances. He practiced combining his powers with those of the other guardians, creating effects more powerful than any of them could achieve alone. But Luke's most important lesson came from an unexpected source. One quiet morning, as he sat meditating by a stream, Misty approached him, her golden eyes seeming to glow with an inner light. As Luke met her gaze, he felt a sudden shift in his perception. In a flash of understanding, he realized that Misty was far more than just a loyal dog. She was a spirit of the forest, a physical manifestation of nature's protective force. "You've been watching over me all this time," Luke whispered in awe. Misty's reply came not in words but in a series of images and feelings that flooded Luke's mind. He saw himself as a baby, felt the forest's joy at his arrival, and understood the deep, ancient magic that had brought Misty into being to protect him. This revelation brought a new dimension to Luke's understanding of his role. He wasn't just using the power of nature. He was part of it, as Misty was, as all living things were. The key to defeating New Dawn lay not in overpowering them, but in reinforcing the intricate web of life they sought to control. As weeks passed, their alliance grew stronger. Animals of the forest, sensing the coming conflict, began to gather. Birds brought messages from distant lands, warning of New Dawn's activities. Even the trees seemed more alert, their whispers carrying farther on the wind. Luke's confidence grew with each passing day, but so did his awareness of the enormous task ahead. New Dawn's influence was vast, their technology formidable. Victory would require not just strength, but wisdom and strategy. The turning point came on a crisp spring morning. Luke, standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the forest, felt a sudden surge of energy. Closing his eyes, he reached out with his senses and gasped at what he perceived. The entire forest, every tree, every creature, every blade of grass, was singing with one voice, a symphony of life and determination. And beyond that, he could feel similar songs rising from forests, oceans, and mountains around the world. Nature itself was rallying to the cause. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Luke turned to his assembled allies, his parents, both adoptive and biological, Emma, Mrs. Martha, the Guardians, and Misty. "It's time," he said, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "We're not alone in this fight. The whole world is with us." As they began to lay out their plans, Luke felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The coming conflict would test them all in ways they couldn't imagine. But looking at the determined faces around him, feeling the power of nature flowing through him, Luke knew they had a real chance of success. Their first major operation was set, a coordinated strike against New Dawn's primary research facility, hidden deep in the Rocky Mountains. It would be dangerous, but if successful, it could deal a crippling blow to the organization's plans. As the group dispersed to make final preparations, Luke took a moment to stand alone, gazing out over the forest he had sworn to protect. The weight of his responsibility was enormous, but he no longer felt overwhelmed by it. Instead, he felt a deep sense of connection to his family, his friends, to nature itself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Luke knew he wouldn't face them alone. With the wisdom of his mentors, the support of his allies, and the power of nature at his side, he was ready to take the next step in his journey as a guardian. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Luke made a silent promise to the forest, to the world, and to himself, he would fight with everything he had to maintain the balance, to protect the harmony between humanity and nature. It was more than a duty. It was his destiny. With a deep breath, Luke turned back towards the cabin, where his team awaited. The real battle was about to begin, and he was ready to lead the charge. The pre-dawn air was crisp and filled with anticipation as Luke and his team made their final preparations. Their target, New Dawn's primary research facility nestled in the Rocky Mountains, loomed in the distance, a stark, angular structure that seemed to defy the natural beauty surrounding it. Luke stood at the edge of their makeshift camp, his eyes closed in concentration. He could feel the energy of the mountain, the trees, and even the air itself, all vibrating with a shared purpose. Opening his eyes, he turned to face his assembled team. "Remember," he said, his voice steady and determined, "our goal isn't destruction. We're here to disrupt their operations and gather information. We fight with nature, not against it." Emma nodded, adjusting the straps of her backpack filled with tech gear. "I'm ready to hack their systems. Once we're in, I should be able to download their research data and plant our virus." Arya, the Wind Guardian, stepped forward. "I'll create a distraction with a localized windstorm. It should keep their security focused on the perimeter." Michael placed a hand on Luke's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, son. You've become the leader we all needed." With a final nod to his team, Luke gave the signal. The operation was underway. Arya moved first, her arms raised as she communed with the air currents. Within moments, a howling wind whipped around the facility, kicking up dust and debris. Alarms blared as New Dawn's security scrambled to respond to the sudden meteorological anomaly. Under the cover of the windstorm, Luke led the infiltration team towards the facility. With a gentle touch to the earth, he called upon the plants around them. Vines and roots burst from the ground, forming a living bridge over the electrified fence. As they approached the main building, Luke felt a sudden chill. The very air seemed to hum with an unnatural energy that set his teeth on edge. "They're doing something big in there," he whispered to Emma. "We need to hurry." Inside the facility was a maze of sterile corridors and locked doors. But Luke's connection to nature gave them an edge. He could sense the flow of energy, leading them unerringly towards the heart of New Dawn's operations. They encountered resistance, security guards, and automated systems, but the team worked in perfect harmony. Riven used his control over water to short-circuit electronics, while Terra caused minor tremors to throw off the aim of their opponents. Finally, they reached the central laboratory. The sight that greeted them made Luke's heart race. Massive machines pulsed with stolen natural energy, feeding into a swirling vortex of power at the center of the room. "This is worse than we thought," Michael breathed, his face pale. "They're trying to create a focal point to control all natural energy." Emma rushed to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm in their system, downloading data now and uploading our virus." As the team worked to sabotage the equipment, Luke approached the energy vortex. He could feel the pain of the natural world, forcibly channeled and distorted. Closing his eyes, he reached out with his power, trying to soothe and redirect the flow. Suddenly, a slow clap echoed through the room. "Impressive, nephew. You've certainly inherited your father's gift." Luke's eyes snapped open. A man stood on a platform above them, his resemblance to Michael unmistakable. This had to be his uncle, the leader of New Dawn. "Uncle," Luke acknowledged, his voice tight. "Why are you doing this? Can't you feel how wrong it is?" The man's laugh was cold. "Wrong? I'm bringing order to chaos, boy. Nature is a tool, waiting to be harnessed. With this power, we can reshape the world." "You're destroying the very balance that sustains us all," Luke argued, his hands clenched at his sides. His uncle's eyes narrowed. "Balance? There is no balance. There is only power, and those too weak to seek it." As they argued, Luke sensed a change in the energy around them. The vortex was becoming unstable, the stolen natural power rebelling against its confinement. "We need to leave now," he shouted to his team. "This whole place is going to blow." As they rushed for the exit, Luke's uncle shouted after them, "This isn't over, Luke. You can't stop progress." They barely made it out before the facility erupted in a spectacular display of uncontrolled natural energy. As they watched from a safe distance, Luke felt a mixture of relief and concern. They had disrupted New Dawn's plans, but at what cost? And his uncle had escaped. This was far from over. Back at their camp, the team regrouped. Emma's face was alight with excitement as she sifted through the stolen data. "Luke, look at this. They have facilities all over the world, but there's something else. References to some kind of nexus point." Michael leaned in, his brow furrowed. "The nexus point is an ancient source of natural power. It's supposed to be a myth, a place where all the ley lines of the world converge. If New Dawn finds it, they could control the entire planet's natural energy," Luke finished, the gravity of the situation settling over him. As the team discussed their next moves, Luke stepped away for a moment, finding a quiet spot to gather his thoughts. Misty padded up beside him, her presence a comforting reminder of his connection to the natural world. Looking out over the mountains, Luke felt the weight of his responsibility more keenly than ever. The battle against New Dawn was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. But as he watched the sun rise, painting the sky in hues of hope, he felt a surge of determination. They had won this battle, and with each victory their strength would grow. Luke knew the path ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face whatever came next. With his team beside him and the power of nature flowing through him, he would fight to maintain the balance, no matter the cost. As he rejoined his team, Luke's voice rang with quiet authority. "We've struck the first blow, but New Dawn is still out there. It's time to take this fight global. We need to find the nexus point before they do." The others nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. As they began to plan their next move, Luke felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. The real adventure was just beginning. The weeks following the raid on New Dawn's facility were a whirlwind of activity. Luke and his team had transformed Mrs. Martha's cozy cabin into a command center, with maps, computers, and communication equipment filling every available space. Emma had been working tirelessly, analyzing the data they'd stolen from New Dawn. Her eyes were bleary from lack of sleep, but there was an excited gleam in them as she called everyone together. "I think I've found something," she announced, pulling up a holographic display. "Look at these energy readings. They're not just random, there's a pattern." The team gathered around, watching as Emma manipulated the display. Points of light appeared across the globe, pulsing in a rhythmic sequence. Michael leaned in, his brow furrowed. "These must be the ley lines we've heard about, but they're changing." Luke felt a chill run down his spine. New Dawn's activities are affecting the global balance of natural energy. Mrs. Martha nodded gravely. "And if they find the nexus point, they could control it all." "So how do we find it first?" John asked, his practical nature coming to the fore. Luke closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses. He could feel the pulse of the ley lines, even from this distance. "We follow the energy," he said softly. "But we can't do it alone, we need help." And so began a new phase in their mission. Using the network of guardians Michael had cultivated over the years, they reached out to allies across the globe. Each guardian brought unique skills and knowledge of their local environments. From the Amazon rainforest came Yara, whose connection to the lush ecosystem was unparalleled. The Australian outback sent Jara, a master of surviving in harsh conditions. The frozen tundra of Siberia was represented by Nikolai, whose understanding of Earth's polar energies proved invaluable. As the global team assembled, Luke felt both excitement and trepidation. The scope of their mission had expanded far beyond what he had initially imagined, but with each new ally, he also felt their collective strength growing. Their first challenge was to stabilize the ley lines that New Dawn had already disrupted. This meant coordinated efforts across multiple continents, with Guardians working in harmony to redirect and balance the flow of natural energy. Luke found himself in the heart of the Amazon, working alongside Yara to heal a particularly damaged node. The humidity was oppressive and insects buzzed incessantly around them, but Luke barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the task at hand. As he placed his hands on the trunk of an ancient kapok tree, he could feel the disrupted energy flowing through its roots. Yara stood opposite him, her eyes closed in concentration. Together they began to sing, not with words, but with the very essence of their power. The forest around them seemed to come alive, leaves rustling in a non-existent breeze. Gradually, Luke felt the chaotic energy smooth out, finding its natural rhythm once more. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In the Australian outback, Jara communed with the ancient rocks, coaxing the Earth's energy back into alignment. Nikolai, in the vast expanse of the Siberian tundra, worked with the ice and snow to restore balance to the polar currents. With each successful operation, Luke's connection to the global network of nature grew stronger. He could sense the pulse of the planet in a way he never had before, feeling the ebb and flow of life across continents and oceans. But their efforts didn't go unnoticed. New Dawn, realizing the threat posed by the resurgent Guardians, began to step up their activities. Reports came in of increased sightings of their operatives, and several times Luke and his allies found themselves in direct confrontation with New Dawn forces. During one such encounter in the mountains of Tibet, Luke faced off against a team of New Dawn agents, armed with technology designed to disrupt natural energy. As they activated their devices, Luke felt a searing pain in his chest, his connection to nature momentarily severed. For a heart-stopping moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him. But then he heard Misty's bark, clear and strong, cutting through the chaos. Focusing on that sound, on his unbreakable bond with his faithful companion, Luke found his center once more. With a surge of power, he called upon the mountain itself. The ground trembled and a wall of rock rose up, shielding him and his team from the New Dawn agents. By the time the dust settled, their opponents had fled, leaving behind their equipment. These skirmishes, while taxing, also provided valuable intelligence. Each encounter gave them more insight into New Dawn's tactics and technology, allowing them to refine their own strategies. As weeks turned into months, the global network of Guardians grew stronger and more coordinated. They moved like a well-oiled machine, responding to threats and healing damaged ley lines with increasing efficiency. But even as they celebrated their victories, Luke couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. New Dawn was being pushed back, yes, but they weren't defeated. And the Nexus Point still remained elusive. One evening, as the team gathered for a strategy session, Emma made a breakthrough. "I've been cross-referencing our ley line data with historical records and geological surveys," she explained, pulling up a new display. "And I think I've found a pattern." The hologram showed a swirling vortex of energy lines, all converging on a single point in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Michael's eyes widened in recognition. "The Ring of Fire. Of course. It's been right in front of us all along." Luke leaned in, studying the display intently. He could almost feel the pull of that convergence point, even from thousands of miles away. "That's it," he said softly. "That's where we'll find the Nexus Point." As the team began to plan their next move, Luke stepped outside for a moment, needing to clear his head. The night sky was ablaze with stars, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine. Misty padded up beside him, resting her head against his leg. Luke scratched behind her ears, drawing comfort from her presence. "We're close, girl," he murmured. "But something tells me the real challenge is still ahead of us." As if in response, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Luke took it as a sign, a reminder that even in the darkest night there was always hope. Squaring his shoulders, he turned back towards the cabin. It was time to prepare for their greatest challenge yet. The race to the Nexus Point was about to begin, and the fate of the world's natural balance hung in the balance. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before them, a vast expanse of blue that seemed to go on forever. Luke stood at the bow of their ship, the Gaia's Hope, feeling the salt spray on his face and the gentle roll of the waves beneath his feet. Behind him, the assembled team of Guardians from around the world prepared for what could be their most crucial mission yet. Emma approached, tablet in hand. "According to our calculations, we should reach the coordinates of the Nexus Point in about 6 hours," she reported. "But Luke, there's something else you should see." She pulled up a satellite image that showed another vessel rapidly approaching their location. "It's New Dawn. They must have figured it out too." Luke's jaw tightened. "Then we're in a race. We need to get there first." As if in response to his words, the sea around them began to churn. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind picked up, whipping their hair and clothes. Riven, the water guardian, rushed to Luke's side. "This isn't natural," he shouted over the rising gale. "New Dawn must have some kind of weather manipulation technology." Luke closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses. He could feel the discord in the elements, the forced chaos that threatened to overwhelm them. Taking a deep breath, he opened himself up to the ocean's energy. "Everyone, lend me your strength," he called out to the team. The Guardians gathered around him, forming a circle. As one, they began to channel their energy into Luke. With their combined power flowing through him, Luke raised his hands. He didn't fight against the storm. Instead, he sought to understand it, to find the natural patterns hidden within the artificial chaos. Gradually, the wind began to calm. The waves, which had been threatening to capsize their ship, settled into a more manageable rhythm. The dark clouds didn't disappear entirely, but they no longer loomed with the same menace. As the immediate danger passed, Luke opened his eyes, swaying slightly from the effort. "We've bought ourselves some time," he said, "but we need to hurry." The next few hours were tense, with everyone on high alert. Arya kept watch from above, using her connection with the air to scan for any approaching threats. Jara and Terra worked together to sense any underwater disturbances that might signal New Dawn's presence. As they neared the coordinates, a strange phenomenon began to manifest. The water around the ship started to glow with an otherworldly blue light. Tendrils of energy, visible to the naked eye, snaked through the air. "We're close," Michael announced, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "The Nexus Point is just ahead." Suddenly, Arya's voice rang out from above. "New Dawn ship spotted. They're closing in fast." Luke's mind raced. They were so close, but if New Dawn reached the Nexus first, all their efforts would be for nothing. He turned to Emma. "Is there any way we can slow them down?" Emma's eyes lit up. Actually, yes. Remember that virus we planted in their system during the raid? I think I can activate it remotely. It won't stop them, but it should buy us a few minutes. Do it, Luke nodded. As Emma worked her technological magic, the rest of the team prepared for what lay ahead. The energy in the air was palpable now, crackling with potential. Suddenly, the sea before them began to part, revealing a swirling vortex of pure energy. At its center, a small island rose from the depths, the physical manifestation of the Nexus Point. Incredible, breathed Mrs. Martha, her eyes wide with wonder. But there was no time to marvel at the sight. The New Dawn ship had appeared on the horizon, rapidly closing the distance despite Emma's sabotage efforts. "We need to get to that island," Luke declared. "Riven, can you create a path for us?" The Water Guardian nodded, stepping to the ship's edge. With a graceful motion of his arms, he parted the turbulent waters, creating a narrow bridge to the island. Luke turned to the team. "I need a small group with me. The rest of you, hold off New Dawn as long as you can." In the end, it was decided that Luke, Emma, Michael, and Misty would make the final push to the Nexus, while the others defended their position. As they raced across Riven's water bridge, Luke could hear the sounds of battle erupting behind them. He forced himself not to look back, trusting in his team's abilities. The island, up close, was unlike anything Luke had ever seen. The ground pulsed with veins of energy, and at its center stood an ancient stone structure, reminiscent of a temple. As they approached the structure, a figure stepped out from behind one of the columns. Luke's heart sank as he recognized his uncle, the leader of New Dawn. "I must admit, I'm impressed you made it this far," his uncle said, a cold smile on his face. "But I'm afraid this is where your journey ends." "The power of the Nexus will belong to New Dawn." Luke stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tension thrumming through his body. "You're wrong, Uncle. This power doesn't belong to anyone. It's part of the natural balance, and it needs to stay that way." His uncle's smile turned into a sneer. "Balance? Nature is chaos, boy. It needs to be controlled, harnessed for the greater good." "You're the one who doesn't understand," Luke replied, feeling the energy of the Nexus resonating with his own. "True balance isn't about control. It's about harmony." As they faced off, the energy around them began to intensify. The Nexus was reacting to their presence, to the conflict between their ideologies. Luke knew that the next few moments would determine the fate of not just the Nexus, but the entire world's natural balance. With Misty at his side, Emma and Michael backing him up, and the spirit of all of nature flowing through him, he prepared to make his final stand. The true test of his role as a guardian was about to begin, and Luke was determined to prove that the power of harmony and balance could overcome the desire for control and domination. The fate of the world's natural order hung in the balance, and the final confrontation was about to unfold on this mystical island in the heart of the Pacific. The air crackled with tension as Luke and his uncle faced each other at the heart of the Nexus Point. The ancient stone structure pulsed with energy, responding to their presence and the conflict between them. "You don't have to do this," Luke said, his voice calm despite the storm of emotions within him. "We can work together to protect the balance, Uncle. It's not too late." His uncle's laugh was bitter. "Protect? The world is dying, Luke. Our way will save it, shape it into something better." "At what cost?" Michael interjected, stepping forward to stand beside his son. "You've forgotten what it means to be a guardian, brother." For a moment, a flicker of doubt passed across his uncle's face, but it was quickly replaced by determination. "Enough talk. The Nexus will be ours." With a gesture, he activated a device on his wrist. The ground beneath them trembled as massive machines erupted from the Earth, New Dawn technology that had been lying in wait. "Emma, can you disable those?" Luke asked urgently. Emma was already typing furiously on her tablet. "I'm trying, but their systems are more advanced than anything I've seen before." As the machines whirred to life, beginning to siphon energy from the Nexus, Luke felt a sharp pain in his chest. The natural balance was being disrupted, and he could sense it acutely. Closing his eyes, Luke reached out with his senses, trying to connect with the heart of the Nexus. He felt its pain, its struggle against the artificial intrusion. But beneath that, he sensed something else, a vast, ancient consciousness that seemed to stretch across time and space. Opening his eyes, Luke saw the world differently. Energy flowed in visible streams connecting everything, the stones beneath his feet, the air around him, even the machines that threatened to destroy it all. This isn't just about our world, he realized aloud. The Nexus, it's a connection point to something much bigger. His uncle paused, curiosity overcoming his drive for a moment. What are you talking about? Luke took a deep breath, allowing the energy of the Nexus to flow through him. It's a bridge between realms, between different aspects of nature across the universe. By trying to control it, we risk unbalancing everything. As if in response to his words, the energy around them intensified. The stone structure at the center of the island began to glow, projecting images into the air around them. They saw glimpses of other worlds, of alien landscapes teeming with life, all connected by the same threads of energy. Luke's uncle stared in awe, his composure slipping. This is beyond anything we imagined. Which is why it can't be controlled, Luke pressed. It needs to be protected, to be in harmony with all of nature, across all realms. For a long moment, his uncle was silent, conflict clear on his face. Then, slowly, he nodded. Perhaps we've been wrong all along. But before anyone could react, one of the New Dawn machines malfunctioned, overloading with the excess energy it was trying to contain. A blast of pure power erupted from it, heading straight for Luke's uncle. Without hesitation, Luke leaped forward, pushing his uncle out of the way. The energy struck him instead, lifting him off his feet and sending him crashing to the ground. "Luke!" Emma cried out, rushing to his side. As Luke lay there, his vision blurring, he felt a strange sensation. The energy that had struck him wasn't destroying him. It was merging with him, as if recognizing him as a true guardian. Misty appeared at his side, her golden eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. As she touched her nose to his hand, Luke felt strength flowing back into him. Slowly he stood, his body now pulsing with the same energy that flowed through the Nexus. He understood now on a level beyond words what needed to be done. Walking to the center of the stone structure, Luke placed his hands on an ancient altar. The entire island seemed to hold its breath. "I am Luke Thompson," he spoke, his voice resonating with power. "Guardian of Earth, protector of the balance. I stand as a bridge between realms, a keeper of harmony, of... The Nexus is not ours to control, but ours to serve." As he spoke, the chaotic energy around them began to stabilize. The New Dawn machines powered down, their artificial interference no longer able to disrupt the natural flow. Luke turned to his uncle, who was watching with a mixture of awe and regret. "Will you join us? Will you remember what it truly means to be a guardian?" His uncle hesitated for a moment, then nodded, tears in his eyes. I had forgotten. But you've reminded me, nephew. Thank you." As the two embraced, the energy of the Nexus swirled around them, accepting them both as protectors rather than adversaries. Emma, Michael, and Misty gathered around, and together they watched as the Nexus stabilized. Its power no longer a threat, but a promise, a connection to the greater tapestry of nature across the universe. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues, Luke knew that their journey was far from over. The Nexus would need ongoing protection, and there was much work to be done to heal the damage caused by New Dawn. But as he stood there, surrounded by family both old and new, with Misty faithfully by his side, and the power of nature flowing through him, Luke felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. He had found his true purpose as a guardian, not just of his forest or even his planet, but of the delicate balance that connected all living things across the cosmos. The adventure that had begun with a baby abandoned in the forest had led to this moment of universal harmony. And though the path forward was uncertain, Luke knew that with the wisdom of his mentors, the support of his allies, and the power of nature itself, he could face any obstacle. As night fell on the island of the Nexus, Luke and his team began to plan for the future, a future where guardians and nature worked in true partnership, maintaining the balance that sustained all life on Earth and beyond. The years that followed the confrontation at the Nexus Point brought about profound changes, not just for Luke and his immediate circle, but for the entire world. The revelation of the interconnectedness of nature across realms had shifted the paradigm of how humanity viewed its place in the universe. Luke, now in his early 20s, stood at the edge of his childhood forest, Misty faithfully by his side. The silver dog's fur had a few streaks of grey now, but her golden eyes were as bright and alert as ever. As Luke gazed out at the lush greenery before him, he couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. The Forest Guardians Foundation, which Luke had established with the help of his family and allies, had grown into a global organization dedicated to environmental preservation and education. Centers had been set up around the world, each one a hub for learning about the balance of nature and the responsibilities of being a guardian. Emma emerged from the trees, tablet in hand as always. Her technological expertise had been crucial in developing new, sustainable technologies that worked in harmony with nature, rather than against it. "The latest reports are in," she said, a smile playing on her lips. "The global reforestation project is ahead of schedule. We're seeing ecosystem recovery rates that were thought impossible just a few years ago." Luke nodded, a sense of pride warming his chest. "And the ley lines?" "Stable," Emma replied. "The network of Guardians is doing an amazing job maintaining the balance. Your uncle's team in Asia just reported a major breakthrough in restoring a damaged node." The mention of his uncle brought a complex mix of emotions. After the events at the Nexus, Luke's uncle had dedicated himself to undoing the damage caused by New Dawn, working tirelessly to restore balance wherever he could. It had been a long road to redemption, but he had proven himself a valuable ally and a true guardian once more. As they walked back towards the cabin, now expanded into a proper Guardian headquarters, Luke reflected on the changes in his personal life. His relationship with Michael, his biological father, had deepened into one of mutual respect and understanding. Meanwhile, Mary and John, his adoptive parents, remained the bedrock of his emotional support. Mrs. Martha, now well into her 90s but still sharp as ever, had taken on the role of chief advisor to the Guardians. Her wisdom and connection to ancient traditions proved invaluable as they navigated this new era of global environmental stewardship. Inside the headquarters, a hive of activity greeted them. Guardians from around the world communicated via holographic projections, sharing knowledge and coordinating efforts. Luke saw Iara discussing Amazonian preservation techniques with a team in Indonesia, while Jara and Nikolai were deep in conversation about balancing energy flows in extreme climates. Michael approached, a warm smile on his face. "Luke, we've just received word from the Nexus. It's time for the Harmony Ceremony." Luke's heart quickened. The Harmony Ceremony was a ritual they had established to attune the global network of Guardians with the energy of the Nexus, ensuring continued balance and open communication between realms. As they prepared for the ceremony, Luke couldn't help but think back to that frightened, confused teenager he had once been, just learning about his heritage and responsibilities. The journey had been long and often difficult, but every challenge had led to this moment. The team gathered in the ceremonial chamber, a circular room with a skylight that allowed the stars to shine down upon them. Luke took his place at the center, with the other Guardians forming a circle around him. Misty sat at his feet, her presence a comforting constant. As Luke began the ritual, reaching out with his senses to connect with the Nexus, he felt the familiar rush of energy. But this time something was different. The connection felt stronger, clearer than ever before. Suddenly the room was filled with shimmering light as images from across the universe flooded in. Luke gasped as he saw alien worlds, each with its own unique forms of life and nature, all connected by the same fundamental energy that flowed through Earth. And then, to everyone's astonishment, a figure appeared in the center of the room. A being of pure energy, its form constantly shifting like the aurora borealis. "Greetings, Guardians of Earth," the being's voice resonated in their minds. "We are the cosmic custodians, tasked with maintaining the balance across all realms. Your work has not gone unnoticed." Luke stepped forward, awe evident in his voice. "We are honored. We had no idea there were others out there with similar responsibilities." The being's form shimmered. "The universe is vast and full of wonders, young Guardian. Your planet's awakening to its role in the cosmic balance marks a new chapter in your evolution. You are ready now to join a larger community of protectors." As the being shared knowledge and insights from across the cosmos, Luke felt a profound sense of purpose wash over him. The work they had been doing on Earth was part of something so much bigger, so much more magnificent than they had ever imagined. The ceremony concluded with a burst of energy that left everyone feeling refreshed and inspired. As the cosmic custodian faded from view, its parting words lingered in the air. Remember, Guardians, that the truest strength lies not in power, but in harmony. Continue to nurture the balance, and you will find your place among the stars. In the days that followed, Luke and his team worked tirelessly to process and share what they had learned. The knowledge gifted by the cosmic custodians opened up new avenues of research and understanding, promising a future where humanity could take its place as responsible custodians of their world and beyond. One evening, as the sun set over the forest, Luke found himself back at the old oak tree where his journey had begun. Misty lay at his feet, her tail thumping contentedly against the ground. Emma joined him, intertwining her fingers with his. Over the years, their friendship had blossomed into something deeper, a partnership founded on shared purpose and mutual understanding. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. Luke smiled, his gaze on the horizon. "I'm thinking about how far we've come, and how far we still have to go. This is just the beginning, Emma. We're part of something incredible, something that spans the entire universe." As if in response to his words, a shooting star streaked across the darkening sky. But Luke knew now that it wasn't just a meteor. It was a sign of the vast, interconnected cosmos they were now a part of. With Misty at his feet, Emma by his side, and the support of guardians across the world and beyond, Luke felt ready for whatever the future might hold. The frightened boy abandoned in the forest had grown into a leader, a protector, and a bridge between worlds. As night fell and the stars emerged, Luke Thompson, Guardian of Earth, looked to the sky with hope and determination. The adventure that had begun in this very forest had led to the dawn of a new era for humanity and nature alike. And though challenges would always arise, Luke knew that with harmony, understanding, and the power of connection, there was no obstacle they couldn't overcome. The story of the forest's chosen guardian had become a tale of cosmic proportions, a testament to the enduring power of balance, love, and the unbreakable bond between all living things.